You begin with a familiar stance. Suffering must be escaped or solved. You treat it as a defect in existence, an error that interrupts a meaningful life. Yet the more you oppose it, the more it occupies attention. Ibn Arabi turned this assumption around. He said suffering is not a mistake, but a disclosure, a demand that recognition replace reaction. Pain is not merely an experience. It is a signal that interpretation has overtaken reality. If meaning is forced upon life from preference, suffering persists. If meaning is received from what is, suffering changes its role. The issue, then, is not removal, but understanding. You ask, if suffering is not a punishment, what kind of wisdom does it make available? And what in you must learn to read it? Ibn Arabi lived in 12th century Andalusia, where reason, revelation, and lived practice competed for authority. Philosophers organized truth through argument. Theologians defended doctrine through interpretation. Mystics testified to direct recognition. Ibn Arabi did not reject reason. He placed it within a larger field of knowing. He taught that existence expresses a complete range of attributes, some gentle, some stern, all necessary for reality to be known without omission. Pain and ease are not rivals, but coordinated disclosures. To approach suffering, then, is to approach knowledge. The task is to move from resistance to comprehension. The question becomes, how is this comprehension gained? You call something painful when it contradicts expectation. You say, this should not be, and the statement tightens the experience. Ibn Arabi explained that suffering intensifies when the individual competes with the universal order. The event is one thing. The argument with the event is another. Pain grows where insistence grows. To suffer, in this view, is to measure reality against preference and then prosecute the difference. When preference relaxes, the character of the experience changes. It does not always become pleasant, but it becomes intelligible. You realize that the first relief is not in altering what happens, but in revising how it is read. Then you ask, if the source of distress is interpretation, where should transformation begin? In the world or in attention? You divide experience into good and bad, gain and loss, advantage and harm. Judgment seems to protect you, yet it multiplies conflict. Ibn Arabi taught that such pairs do not compete as enemies. They complete one another as aspects of a whole. When you insist on one pole, you conceal the contribution of the other. Ease can breed forgetfulness. Difficulty can sharpen understanding. Each condition introduces what the other hides. To insist that only one side is valid is to refuse half of reality's instruction. You wonder, if labeling sustains the conflict, what becomes of suffering when the need to sort experience dissolves and you meet what occurs as part of a single order? Ibn Arabi framed events as appearances of divine names: the generous, the just, the withholder, the restorer, and many more. What is called suffering often corresponds to an attribute the self resists. When resources contract, the name of the withholder is active. When balance returns, the restorer is present. Both movements belong to one source and one wisdom. To recognize the active attribute within an event is to shift from personal complaint to attentive reading. This is not a theory designed to excuse harm. It is an invitation to discover purpose within order. The guiding inquiry becomes practical. If the same origin authorizes both contraction and expansion, what new understanding of mercy and justice becomes possible? You cannot command circumstances, but you can examine the lens through which they are known. Ibn Arabi said the world reflects the state of the knower. When attention contracts into self-reference, conflict multiplies. When attention opens to the order that exceeds preference, meaning appears. The shift is from "this should not be" to "this addresses me." The event no longer needs to justify itself. You need to learn from it. Transformation is interpretive before it is circumstantial. You ask, if reality is read through the stance of the reader, what training does attention require so that suffering becomes instruction rather than opposition? Ibn Arabi described the heart as the faculty able to carry opposites without collapse. The intellect separates to clarify. The heart unifies to comprehend. When the heart perceives, it does not erase distinctions. It places them within a wider coherence. The same event can be injurious to preference and yet beneficial to understanding. The intellect can explain this. The heart can endure it. Endurance here is not passive. It is a stable capacity to remain with a reality long enough for its instruction to be revealed. Through the heart, suffering is converted into knowledge, not theoretical knowledge, but recognition by participation. You consider, if the heart can receive contradiction without aggression, what happens to pain when you learn to remain, read, and respond? You say, "I am suffering," as if there is a fixed owner standing apart from the event. Ibn Arabi questioned this separation. He noted that the sufferer is a claim produced by thought, a center that takes possession of experience and then defends it. When attention studies the experience without fastening it to me, the sensation persists, but ownership loosens. The event continues. The story about the event softens. Without the story, there is no adversary to defeat and no identity to protect. What remains is a direct meeting with reality. You ask, if the I that suffers is a concept added to experience, who is present when the concept is set aside? Ibn Arabi treated suffering as a form of unveiling, not a theater of cruelty, but a removal of distraction. Difficulty focuses attention where comfort disperses it. It exposes attachments that quietly direct behavior. It reveals the limits of control. It makes visible the distance between what is wanted and what is. In that exposure, choice becomes simpler. Either continue the argument with reality or investigate the allegiance to preference. Once the lesson is recognized, suffering changes status. It ceases to be teacher and becomes memory. Its purpose has been exhausted. The practical question follows. When attention is sharpened in this way, how do you respond so that the recognition does not fade once comfort returns? At a certain point, analysis completes its task. The event stands as it is. You see its place within a larger order that does not apologize for itself. Ibn Arabi's wisdom does not demand that pain feel pleasant. It asks that pain be read accurately. When it is read accurately, agitation yields to sobriety. The mind no longer negotiates with what has already occurred. Awareness is steady, not because it has mastered life, but because it has stopped insisting that life confirm preference. In that steadiness, understanding is quiet and exact. You ask, if everything already participates in an intelligible whole, what remains to oppose except the reflex of refusal itself? You test the insight in ordinary conditions. First, you notice resistance as soon as it appears, the internal sentence that begins, "This should not be." Second, you identify the attribute the event displays, withholding, justice, restoration, generosity, or another. Third, you ask what the attribute requests from you now: patience, repair, restitution, gratitude, restraint. Fourth, You remove ownership from the experience by dropping the phrase "my suffering" and replacing it with a difficult instruction. Fifth, you act in alignment with the recognized attribute. Ibn Arabi's method is not a retreat from life. It is precise participation. The aim is not comfort at any cost, but comprehension at every cost. You wonder, if practice becomes this consistent, how much of suffering remains as mere complaint? You return to the opening claim: suffering must be escaped. That claim is thinner now. Ibn Arabi has taught you to read, not to react, to integrate, not to divide. Suffering is not an enemy standing outside, meaning but a messenger inside it. Some lessons are gentle, some are severe. All belong to one reality that asks to be known without subtraction. When you stop prosecuting events in the court of preference, attention clears, the heart steadies, and action becomes exact. What you called darkness was unexamined instruction. What you now call clarity is the end of resistance. To transform suffering is not to convert pain into a pleasant feeling. It is to let understanding replace opposition. In that replacement, the mind rests.